Hello, BookTube. It's Friday, and that means Friday Reads here on BookTube, where everybody pauses from making all their other content and decides to talk about what they've read recently, what they're reading at the moment, what they're going to read, their plans, their dreams. And I've shied around this subject one way or another for years. Then last week, I decided to just give it a try. Just try and do a relatively normal Friday Reads, where I tell you a bit about some of the books that I've read recently, and a bit about some of the books that I plan on reading recently. Uh, the key, the thing that broke the logjam for me is that I was always worried that it needed to be complete. And as I've mentioned on this channel a few times, that can't possibly work for me because reading is all I do. I read very fast and I spend all day doing it. So a Friday Reads like that would be not only a very long video, but very boring, I would think. So I tried just an abbreviated version, a sort of snapshot version, last week. And I liked the way it came out. And a lot of you emailed me and said that you liked the way it came out too. So I'm going to try that again this week, and we'll see if it works. I'm going to start off with a few books that I've read recently, and then talk about a few books that I am planning on reading very soon. So the first part would be more along the lines of a recent reads. And the first one that I want to talk about is one that I mentioned last week as part of a TBR. I have now read it. It's As Far As You'll Take Me by Phil Stamper. It's a YA novel by the author of The Gravity of Us, a YA debut that I rather liked. As Far As You'll Take Me is the story of a young gay man who comes to London in an attempt to escape from the strictures of his family, and also in the course of the novel, it's very much a found family novel. He wants to find a new family. It's saturated with music, and that was really nice. It's got Phil Stamper's rather easy way with characterization. I like that as well. It was more than The Gravity of Us. It was easing into closer and closer to uncritiquable territory, into a novel that is very carefully crafted to be uncritiquable, to be critic-proof, as sort of a gay youth hostel handout literature rather than a novel, if you know what I mean, where the author is speaking truths to his readers and offering them life encouragement rather than writing fiction. And if this author's novels migrate all the way over that line into just anthem lit, then they won't be critiquable, not in the sense that you couldn't still tear apart the weakness in the dialogue or the plot or the pacing or whatever, but what would be the point? They're not meant anymore as works of art. So what would be the point of offering artistic criticism of them? This one wasn't quite that, but it shared in common with The Gravity of Us a couple of weaknesses, which discouraged me, because I always kind of hope that a debut author especially will learn from the mistakes of the first book and not just repeat them. I have to believe that a large part of this book was being written while The Gravity of Us was in the process of being prepared as a book. So maybe that's an excuse. Maybe he hadn't had any public criticism of his first book before the second one was finished. One way or another, one of the signature weaknesses of The Gravity of Us was the weakness or non-existence of believable motivations for any of the characters. That is absolutely true in As Far As You'll Take Me, except for the main character. And another weakness, I'm not blaming this author for this because it's endemic to YA, is insufferably cutesy-poo dialogue. For me, that reached its peak with Maybe It's Us, a YA novel about two boys who meet cute in the big city that was all movie trailer quip lines. All of it. Every single line of dialogue in that book was designed to be the quip in the movie trailer that makes the whole audience sort of coo with laughter. And that is grating in the extreme. This book, it wasn't that bad, but it still had that. So I did still enjoy it, though. So I don't know. I have a feeling that on this channel, I am not talking to BookTube's ordinary audience of 30-something readers who read nothing but books written for children, nothing but YA, who read only that. I'm pretty sure I'm not talking to those people. I'm certainly not one of those BookTube channels, or I'd have 80,000 subscribers. Imagine the power I would have if I had 80,000 subscribers. But no, it's never going to happen. I don't imagine that I'm talking to those readers, so I'm not sure what proportion of your reading diet is constituted by YA, but this was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. Then we move on to Foregone by Russell Banks, which is I mentioned it last time. This will be another one of the books that I was going to read last time. I have now read it. I will give it another read because Russell Banks deserves that. He's a pretty formidable contemporary writer of the made-up stories working in our midst. And his previous book, This Memory of Skin, has really stuck with me. I think there were awful novelistic things about that book, and we'll get to that. But there were parts of it that I thought were genuinely daring in a way that an author of Russell Banks' stature not only doesn't need to do, but might be told to shy away from. The more I think about This Memory of Skin, the more impressive I think it is. And Foregone has a lot of those same qualities. So it could be that it's not subject matter, because the subject matter is very different. It could be just that a much more encouraging thing, a much more wonderful thing. It could be that this author continuing to mature, just not caring what his agent or his handlers or the publisher lawyers or anything like that say about his work, or even what his readers say. But just following his own art. That you get that sense, for instance, with William Veblen. I would very much like it if that were true of Russell Banks, considering that he has a huge and affectionate audience. This is, I think you remember from last time, the story of a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War who flees to Canada, lives out a life there, and is telling the story of that life sort of in retrospect as he slips off the twig in the book. And that is such a novelistic device that you'd think it would bring out the worst in a novelist, since novelists novelize ordinary lived life anyway. But to tell it as a sort of Citizen Kane story, that it encourages them. and there are elements of that in Foregone. There are very stagey elements in the book. But then again, there were very stagey elements in This Memory of Skin as well, including a literal act of God. so I'm not sure that I can condemn those as just a weakness. Those are almost certainly an authorial choice. I thought Foregone was very, very memorable, very, very good. I plan on giving it a scrutinized reread a little bit closer to its publication date. Then we have a big biography that is not exactly in my line of country. We saw it on this channel. It's Veblen, a big biography of Thorsten Veblen by Charles Camic. I suspect that is pronounced Camich, but I could be wrong. I looked, for instance, last week on YouTube, see if maybe he has a YouTube talk that where some assistant librarian might have introduced him and pronounced his name in a way that I assume he would have vetted or at least corrected. And I couldn't find anything. Maybe there is such a thing, and I just didn't look hard enough. To say the least, I am not accustomed to looking on YouTube for videos about Thorsten Veblen, who's a trailblazing economist, the guy who gave us the term conspicuous consumption, and who was writing about the last era in American history where conspicuous consumption and the divide between the poor and the rich was as conspicuous as it is now. One of the reasons why somebody could go to a biography of this figure with sharpened interest right now would be because the divide between the super rich, who own 70% of the wealth in the world, and the rest of us. So between 50 people and the other 8,999,999,800. That's the gap between those has never been greater. And there was just an article in the news yesterday that was, I assume, not tongue-in-cheek, about families in New York and San Francisco facing a bit of hardship because it's so hard to look at realty properties during a pandemic. You've got to stay far apart from each other. You've got to wear masks, and they have to look at those properties because they want to buy fully staffed and furnished second or third homes for their adult children, so that those children will have someplace to twiddle their thumbs during a pandemic until things open up again, just until things are normal. You have to indulge yourself just a little until things are normal. with millions of Americans sitting for hours in line on bread lines. We're not calling them bread lines, we're calling them food banks, but nevertheless, those two things are available in the same news cycle, in the same newspaper. So that this particular economist has never been more relevant. That's a poisonous word when you're talking about justifying a biography. And I was very happy to see that this author doesn't do that. His publicist might, but the book doesn't do that. The book is just a totally refreshed new biography of this figure, what his own life was like. And I read a long and very good piece on this book and on this figure in The New Yorker. I just recently resubscribed to The New Yorker, and boy, oh boy, the book section certainly has borne out that subscription. A couple of you have emailed me and said, and in case any of you are new to this Friday Reads, maybe you found this from a Friday Reads, when I keep mentioning people have emailed me, I'm not talking about bosom buddies or ex-lovers, although God knows there's plenty of those on BookTube. No, I'm talking about the email that I leave on these videos. It's not a merch store. It's not a dummy email I check once a year. It's my email. It goes to my inbox. So people email me all the time, but a whole bunch of things. Not just my videos, but anything you want. Anything's on your mind. Been honored in those emails to get people looking for life advice, asking about a particular problem with a relative or a friend, asking what they can do with their own mental stress during lockdown. And a couple of people have emailed me and said, well, you do know that great subscription rate to The New Yorker is probably a trick, right? They're probably going to up the rate after a very limited number of weeks and just have you on the hook. You'll have to cancel. And I thought about that and realized if the book coverage stays this good, I won't care. I will pay the exorbitant price. I won't mind at all. But I read that article, and I had already read this book. I got an advance copy. I read it before I sent it out to David Murphy, the late lamented David Murphy, whose ghost still haunts the bordello where his bullet-ridden corpse was found, as they say on The Simpsons. And I thought it was tremendously good reading, but naturally I deferred to him. Those of you who are new to our little corner of BookTube, David Murphy used to make videos and has degrees in economics, and boy, oh boy, they're not for show. You can feel free to look at some of his older videos about economics. He never shuts up on the subject, knows more about it than anybody who has a pulse. And when I was reading the book, I thought, okay, well, this is a fascinating life story, but surely there's a lot more to it than that that exists on an economic plane that I won't get, and that he will. And reading it the second time, I just got a finished copy, and after I had read that New Yorker piece, I thought, well, how much does that matter, right? I've read every biography of Beethoven that's ever been written in English. I can't compose music, so that pulled the limitation back on my eyes just a bit. So I loved the book, absolutely loved it, and I recommend it. And I recommend it even if you don't know anything about economics, which most of you probably won't know more than I do. And I recommend the book anyway. Then we have a murder mystery. This is Blood Grove by Walter Mosley. This is an Easy Rawlins mystery, the character that shot him to fame. And in this novel, Easy Rawlins is presented with a potential case. He typically takes cases, but it's in the 60s. He's presented with a messy case, an ugly case, a Vietnam vet who's had people disappear on him. And he's not only is the vet the subject of a good deal of suspicion and scrutiny on his own, but he's not 100% sure of himself. He is traumatized from the war. And he sort of openly invites Easy Rawlins to sort of walk into this world and make sense of it, which is what this character tends to do. They are murder mysteries. They're billed that way. But really what Walter Mosley has this character do, in the great old sense of the classic everyman gumshoe, is to walk into a world of chaos and make sense out of it, even if it's an ugly kind of sense. I love that aspect of Easy Rawlins, and this is an amazing book. Amazingly ambitious. It takes on so much. And unfortunately, much like the Veblen book, it's going to have uncomfortable resonances with the modern day. It's going to show a lot of readers, especially readers who maybe don't pay attention to the news, who only read, that the news cycles of racial tension in this country recur until systematic stuff is done to fix them. Till AOC is president, they're going to recur, and they're all over this book. I mean, this is an author who is scrupulous about his historical research anyway, but this book marries the two. The personalities, all the great old characters from Easy Rawlins' supporting cast are all back here. The character of Easy Rawlins himself his adopted daughter, all sorts of tension involved there, all sorts of emotional vulnerabilities he's laid himself open to. All that is still here and would have made a great novel all on its own, but there's just a powder keg of historical factors, not just racial, but also Vietnam. Just amazing. I thought Bloodgrove was incredible. And it, too, I will reread. Because when you get to a book like this, you really start to strain the difference between what we're talking about. What actual difference are we talking about here between a book like this and a book like Foregone by Russell Banks, except that the characters in Bloodgrove have appeared before. We've seen them before. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about those two books in tandem since I read them, and wondering about some of these distinctions that we make. Walter Mosley is a serious writer, working in a form that we don't associate with seriousness. That's I don't know. I'll ponder and I'll bore you about it some other time. And then the last of the recent reads is certainly an author who wants us to call him serious, and I have never known what to do with this. And now it's not a problem that's going to go away. It's David Duchovny, Fox Mulder from The X-Files. A hit TV show. He has TV money for the rest of his life. The X-Files spun off into movies. He also had a fairly successful cable show, Californication, that was, or California, whatever it was called. I watched one episode, realized that it wasn't for me. David Duchovny has a very pricey education, and it's all based around literature. And he's been writing novels. And I read the first two and thought, okay, these are Hollywood star vanity projects. They aren't bad, but they aren't good. They're the novels of Ethan Hawke. They aren't bad, but they aren't good either. There's no way they would have made it past the slush pile and the vetting editors at any major publishing house if not for the name of the author. No way in the world. And I sort of dismissed them at that, but obviously David Duchovny has not dismissed them. He is continuing to do so, and his fourth novel is called Truly Like Lightning, in which a sort of rapacious land developer encounters a Mormon extended family, a man and his wives and his children, living in California's high desert on what could be an incredibly valuable piece of property. And she sort of coerces a deal out of the main character of the novel, to expose his children to a modern school and the modern world. They have been completely shut off from the modern world. They've lived in this own little world of their own. And it hasn't been uncomfortable or ugly at all. It's been a kind of an idyllic little world of its own. The deal is, expose the children to the world, and if they don't like it, if you don't like the changes that it works in them, then fine, no harm, no foul. And if you do, then this developer gets a chunk of the land. There's a chunk of this valuable land on the table. And the basic outline, the basic scheme of this novel is one perfectly designed to bring into the spotlight questions of religion, questions of urban flight, questions of, again, the rampant divide between the haves and have-nots. It's perfectly designed to bring all of those things into the spotlight. It just doesn't do them well. That's all. It just doesn't do them well. Because the 25, 30 years when David Duchovny would, had he been a novelist, have been working out how to make his craft sing, how to deepen it and broaden it, much like Walter Mosley has been doing, much like Russell Banks has been doing. Had he been spending those years doing that, maybe this novel would have worked, but instead he was spending those years as the star of a hit TV show that we all love. And I'm not sure you can have both. I'm not 100% sure that you can have both. One way or another, there were a couple of parts of this novel that I liked. There were a couple of scenes that had obviously been polished really well. But most of it felt like workshop fiction. Most of it felt like training wheel stuff. Like okay, this is a little ham-handed, and if Russell Banks, for instance, had written the 40 pages that I just read, his friends and his editor would have said, no, this isn't up to your level at all. If we publish this, you're going to get savaged by the critics. who are going to say that you phoned this in. Now, you might be thinking, okay, it's not that much of a criticism of even a fourth-time novelist to say he's not as good as Russell Banks. Okay, fine, but this thing is going to get serious notice. There are plenty of my fellow book critics out there, I guarantee you, no matter how secure their berths are, I guarantee you there are plenty of them out there who are going to be starstruck by this thing. I saw it happen with Ethan Hawke. I saw it happen and worked my hardest against it with James Franco. Tried to do the same thing. Mercifully has not tried since. But I believe in print reviewing all three of the fictional excursions of James Franco. And it almost happened with Justin Timberlake. Thank God. Thank God his basketball novel got scrapped before it was foisted upon us in the NSYNC days. but with this author, no, he's continued. He's borne it out, and there are going to be critics who are going to read this book and say this is a serious novel. And they're going to be doing it with a sliding scale. They're going to be doing it by moving the goalposts to think, well, how good a novel are we expecting from David Duchovny? And if I were David Duchovny, I would be insulted by that kind of thing, by that kind of grade scale. And once again, I went into this novel once again propelled by the New Yorker, because there was a long one of those profiles at the beginning of every issue. They did a writer did a profile of David Duchovny, and it was airbrushed until it squeaked. It was meant to make him seem completely accessible, completely lovable, and yet quirky. And a part of it, because the writer of the profile was so talented, a part of that worked on me. I went into this thing with a bit more goodwill than I would ordinarily have had, but the word is underwhelming. It was underwhelming. It's a great scheme for a novel. And I was thinking the whole time, what could Walter Mosley or Russell Banks do with it? But so anyway, those are the recent reads. Maybe a little bit too much of the made-up stories. Maybe that's why the verdicts aren't all as glowing as I'd like them to be. But then we'll move on. We'll go a little briefer to the TBR. There are a few books that are on my immediate radar, and one that is, but that I don't have and I have no means of getting. One is by Emma Southon, Southon, called A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, about murder in ancient Rome. How the ancient Romans did it, how they thought about it, how they reacted to it, not just among the famous, not just the dead emperors, but just a study of that in general. That's what it sounds like. I would have, had I been on the publicity board, I would strongly have urged against the title of the book. I can sing for you every single song from the show, the Broadway show starring Zero Effin Mostel, from, I think, 175 years ago is when A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum was a hit on Broadway. I think that was about 175 years ago. I'm pretty sure that James Monroe was president. Absolutely insane to take off on the title of a 175-year-old Broadway musical for the title of a book in 2021, when half the readers will never have heard the word Broadway, and the other half will certainly not know this show. They won't have any idea why this book has the title that it does. I don't have any idea why that was true. Why not just call it Maybe It Was Maybelline or something like that? But one way or another, I'm looking forward to the book. I'm always happy with popular Roman studies. Once again, 2021 looks to be shaping up, much like 2020, to be fairly weak, in fact, incredibly weak when it comes to serious popular Roman history. So I'll take what I can get. Absolutely. The next one is Lady in Waiting. It's by Anne Glenconner, who was the daughter of the Earl of Leicester, a very, very wealthy member of the British peerage, and who grew up at court. She grew up in the court of the House of Windsor. So she was a childhood friend to Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, and then went on to be a lady in waiting to Princess Margaret for the whole of her life, basically. And I mean, I will read this anyway. Of course, I try never to miss a major publication on the House of Windsor, but Anne Glenconner had a fascinating life. A lot of fascinating things happened to her. A lot of high drama, high profile things happened to her. And I'm hoping that they get the emphasis, and that her life as a lady in waiting, which really isn't as interesting as you might think it would be, is sort of the backdrop to her story of that life. We'll see. I'll report back. Then we have Until the World Shatters by Daniel Combs, which is an inside look at the turmoil that is the day-to-day society of Myanmar. Not just civil war and echoes of civil war and threats of more civil war and martial law and whatnot, but also the jade trade the trade in jade gems. If you have jade anywhere in your house, it almost certainly came from Myanmar somehow or other. And this writer apparently is going to go into that society and write all about it. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. I heard all about it when I spent time in Burma. I heard all about all of the twists and turns of society. Just a fascinating story that most readers in the West know nothing about. So a fairly high-profile, accessible work that looks into those things and writes all about them, much will depend on the author, on the execution of the material, but I'm looking forward to it. Then we have something for the gays. I know that we had Phil Stamper, but he's not really for the gays. He's more for the eunuchs. The gay eunuchs is more like that. We're going to deal here with a novel for the gays. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see what it does and doesn't do. It's called Featherbed, and it's by Annabeth Albert. And once again, as with most of these self-published authors, I always have the feeling that I've read them before. I may have read something by Annabeth Albert before. And I was going to tell you about Featherbed, but really the author's own publicity material does it better than I possibly could, so I'm just going to read it to you. Harrison Philip Fletcher III isn't supposed to be here. Not in Burlington, Vermont. Not running Vino and Veritas, a quaint, inclusive bookstore and wine bar, and definitely not still alive at 42. Also not supposed to be here, an unexpected delivery of chickens. Finn Barnes knows chickens. The burly organic farmer knows all about the rare breed poultry, but dealing with a hot, older bookseller is entirely different matter. Isn't it always? City slicker types like Harrison never end up staying in Vermont for the long term. I tried. I was kicked out. They should steer clear of each other, but the flair of attraction is mutual. Lust over the bird shells. And somehow, amidst the book discussions and farm tours, they discover plenty in common. Now they're stealing kisses in Finn's barn, sneaking out like teens, and burning up the sheets. Until it's time for the 3 o'clock feed. What starts as a fling brings real feelings to two lonely souls, but a future together seems as unlikely as chickens in a bookstore. Feathers may be flying, but learning to trust each other takes time that neither may have. I'm gathering from this that Harrison Philip Fletcher III is probably sick somehow. Can they take a leap of faith together before it's too late? That's Featherbed by Annabeth Albert. It will almost certainly be entertaining, even though it probably won't be Edmund White. We'll give it a try. And then the last book on the TBR part here is something that I don't have. It's very pricey. I'm going to have to bite the bullet. I don't have a contact at the publisher. Don't know why, but I don't. And it's a very pricey item, but it is something that I have wanted for a long time. In fact, I've told you on this channel that I've wanted it for a long time. It is one of those... Do I have one nearby? No. It's one of those enormous omnibus hardcover comic book collections. It's a Marvel omnibus edition. It's the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition, which is the thing Marvel did. Here we go. Marvel did these black and white essential lines, these cheap paperbacks of the deluxe edition of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe years and years ago, and mine are falling apart. This is just cheap ink on page, and some of the pages that I've consulted more than others, the ink is starting to rub off. And there's no color. All of these things were done in color. Originally, Marvel did the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which breaks down the major heroes and the major villains in terms of their appearances, their superpowers, their various adventures, etc., etc. And then fans loved it. I loved it. I loved that original one. And Marvel did a deluxe enhanced edition of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe years later, where they added lots more characters. They revamped a lot of the artwork, and they drastically increased the amount of detail that you get. So no longer character X is from Brooklyn, but character X went to this high school, and went to this college. And the details about the superpowers, which is so much fun to read, were enhanced enormously. Which is why, a year ago or so, Marvel came out with an omnibus edition of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the first edition. And I complained and said, why would they do that when they made a totally improved edition later? Why not just do an omnibus of that? And I think at the time, on this channel, I said, well, since they did an omnibus of the original version, they'll never do one of the deluxe edition. They are. They are doing one of the deluxe edition. I think it comes out in March. It's a huge thing. It's all in full color, and it's expensive. It's $150. So I don't have it yet, but it is definitely on my radar because this is a case where I know I want the book, because these black and white paperbacks I have worn to shreds. They won't survive forever. Whereas a nice big hardcover, even if it's a little bit over heavy, as those Marvel Omnibus editions tend to be, will still be something that I will very much want. I will very much use it all the time, even if I have to rearrange the bedside so that it's right there and I don't have to lug it around the room. One way or another, that is definitely on my TBR. I will ransack my emails and the people that I know for some sort of contact at Marvel Comics. This is a $150 oversized hardcover, and I can guarantee Marvel Comics at least a few hundred sales, which is as much as their comic book channels can do, the comic book channels on YouTube that get these things as review copies from contacts at Marvel that I just don't have. I get them at Marvel or DC Comics from time to time. Then they go somewhere else. They get another job. They don't give me a forwarding email or tell me who's taking over the account. So I'm back to square one. That's where I am right now with Marvel Comics. As far as I know, I don't have a contact there. So I don't have somebody to send this to me, even though I'm going to be doing what amounts to promotion one way or another. I don't need a free copy. I'm happy to buy one. I just, $150. I'm perfectly happy to spend that on a Chromebook that was made in 1980, but on something I actually need. But anyway, there's your Friday reads. Another Friday reads. You'll once again have to tell me, either in the comments or via email, whether or not you like this at all. This is my attempt to approximate a normal BookTube Friday reads. So I enjoy doing it. You'll have to tell me if you enjoy the result. One way or another, that's enough videos for one day. So I'm going to sign off, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.